In this video, I want to talk about some of the top use cases for blockchain technology that really nobody's talking about. Of course, there's a ton of hype around gaming, NFTs, DeFi, cryptocurrency in general. But what I want to do in this video is show you that we're really just scratching the surface for what's possible with this technology on the grand scheme of things, and show you some specific things that we can actually create that nobody's really discussing at the moment. Because that's one big benefit that you can achieve, is if you actually understand this technology through and through, then you can catch this kind of stuff before it happens. And that's exactly what I want to help you do on this channel. So if you're new around here, hey, I'm Gregory, and on this channel, I turn you into a blockchain master. So if that's something that you're interested in, then smash that like button down below for the YouTube algorithm and subscribe to this channel. And if you want to learn how to master blockchain step-by-step, start to finish, then head on over to dappuniversity.com/bootcamp to get started today. So let's talk about some of the things that I see that blockchain can have a huge impact on that people aren't really talking about right now. Now, some of these things have been tried in the past and haven't quite taken hold yet. And maybe not everything on this list will actually end up sticking in the long run. But there's a funny thing about technology. Like sometimes technology comes out and it's not wrong, it's just early. Okay, maybe there's not the user's demand just yet for this type of application. Maybe so there's something slightly wrong about the design, or maybe the actual underlying technology used to create the thing itself wasn't just quite ready to, satisfy the user demand. So let's talk about what some of those things could be. All right, so number one is decentralized identity. So basically this is just taking your actual identity that you have now and creating some sort of blockchain version of it. And there's actually lots of benefits to this, which I'm going to lay out right now. So how do you represent yourself now? Well, basically, you might have some ID, government issued ID, plus maybe some sort of unique identifier number that's issued by, your country. And that allows you to do things like, register to vote in election. You get a credit score many times, so you can, take out loans, have a credit card, or prove your identity online in some way. Maybe just sign some documents, register for a bank account, etc., etc. Well, a lot of this stuff can actually be moved over to blockchain and could have some huge benefits that, our existing system doesn't. So let's talk about what some of these things are. So if you wanted to, register to vote and actually vote on a blockchain, you could automate all that process of like proving that you are who you say you are, and this is what your vote is, and your vote was cast and your vote was counted. You could actually audit that. Now, there's of course some things that be worked out in order to make voting actually work digitally, but that's just one use case for, how your identity could be a value add of actually having it on the blockchain rather than some other way. Let's talk about another way, which is basically helping preserve your privacy, particularly with something called zero-knowledge proofs, okay? So what are zero-knowledge proofs? Well, basically, it's a way of cryptographically proving that information is true without, revealing the information itself. So a good example of this is, what if you want to prove information about yourself without revealing who you are, what all that information is? Because this is one big problem with Web 2.0 online right now, is people just taking your data and selling it to advertisers, and your privacy is completely wrecked. So with Web 3.0, what if you could create something with blockchain where you have a decentralized identity management system where the only time that you provide information about you is like when they want to know specific things about it. If you're an iPhone user, maybe you've seen this, where you pick up your phone and you see like app is asking for this permission, to use microphone or to access photos on your device, whatever it is. You can have a similar type of thing where you have an identity management system that just reveals certain information about you without knowing who you are. So, or what the information is itself. So, app wants to know, are you over 21 years of age? You could just provide that as valid information without saying, oh, I'm, 25 or whatever the number is. And you don't even have to know any other information like your name, email, etc., etc. All right, so that's helping preserve privacy. And so you could also take this to the next step of basically having decentralized identity that, is completely anonymous, but it's built off of reputation, okay? So maybe you could have some sort of on-chain identity that didn't know anything about you, but you had to earn reputation over time in order to, get the benefits of holding that identity. You kind of see this already with like the anonymous Twitter accounts that have their, Ethereum wallets, linked to them. You can see all their on-chain activity, and that sort of acts as, the verification for their identity itself. But you can take this to the next level. If we eventually have things like, under collateralized loans on DeFi, maybe you could do that based upon your activity in the past. You could establish some sort of online identity that has a reputation behind it that carries from application to application and exists across the entire internet without having to know actually who owns that identity in the first place. All right, so that's kind of a long explanation for the first idea, but the next one, I'll keep it short and sweet. So it's kind of taking the ID thing to the next step, and maybe an application of what you can do with your decentralized identity, which is essentially digital signatures. So this could basically be a way for you to sign legal contracts. It could be a way for you to sign anything where you authorize something to happen in the real world that is valid, legal consent or legal agreement. So, blockchain identity is way better for this because, like, right now, if you've ever done anything like these days, sometimes you get like a DocuSign and it's got this phony little signature on it and you just like associate with your email address. It's kind of silly. So, like, taking this to the next step, we can use this with blockchain where we actually have digital signatures. And the big benefit here is transparency into this process. Anybody can audit that it was actually signed. It can completely speed up the process, and you could actually potentially even implement legal contracts as smart contracts that are recognized in the real world. All right, so the next big use case that has gotten some attention in the past, but I think is prime, honestly, for a big comeback is supply chain for blockchain. Supply chain's kind of been at the forefront of people's minds over the past year or so as we've seen global events unfold that have dramatically impacted the supply chain. People have seen inefficiency problems. Now, I'm not saying blockchain can necessarily fix all those problems, but this pain is, felt acutely right now. And there could be ways where we could smooth out some of this process with blockchain. So let's talk about what those are. So some of the reasons I think, first I'll say some of the reasons I think that the supply chain hasn't worked well in the past is because some people are scratching their heads saying, well, there's all these trust assumptions. If you're talking about, an item moving through the supply chain, then somebody has to act honestly when it moves from one place to another. If you're talking about using blockchain as a public ledger to do that. But there's still lots of other benefits. Like, even if you can't do something in a completely trustless way, you still have transparency. If somebody acts dishonestly in the supply chain or just does something wrong, it's easy to audit and pinpoint exactly where that happened. And everybody has access to that information. It doesn't just live in my database and I have to trust, you have to trust me if I produce that information and vice versa. There's a huge efficiency benefit where all this stuff can be tracked in real time, okay? So kind of like in DeFi. So, like if you have a publicly traded company that reports their earnings quarterly, you have to wait for all that stuff to happen and come out. So in DeFi, everything moves as fast, like information moves as fast as new blocks are created. And the same type of thing can happen with supply chain. It just speeds things up. It's efficiency. You don't have to wait for somebody to produce reports from their system. You can audit everything on chain. You can automate the process of generating those reports so you can track these things as they happen in real time, address things faster. And that overall increases the efficiency of what happens in the supply chain and makes some of these problems better. All right, so another idea that nobody's really talking about, I say nobody, I actually just made a video on this, but I wanted to include it in case you missed that video because I think it belongs in this list, is actually token curated registries. Okay, so this is another old idea that could make a comeback at some point, maybe even soon. Okay. So what is a token curated registry? Well, you can think about it sort of like Yelp on the blockchain, where essentially you have these lists of information that are curated. But with Web 2.0 right now, these lists are highly centralized. Basically, you have to trust that there's, you don't exactly know exactly what's going on behind the scenes. These lists are created, like you say the top 10 restaurants. You don't know somebody's paying to be at the top of that list. If like anybody who says a negative comment about service providers completely censored, or maybe some things aren't allowed on the list at all. It's a complete black box with tons of trust assumptions. So token curated registries kind of they change this, right? It's like moving from Web 2.0 to Web 3.0. It reinvents, the mechanics of this and changes the incentives entirely. So basically, token holders are the ones that curate the list, and their incentive is for the list to be good and to be valid and accurate. Okay, and so if new people try to come onto the list, they want to make sure that they actually belong. And so there's all this, procedure about getting on and like challenging things that have all these financial incentives to them. And so I definitely think this can work. So definitely go check out the video that I put out for more in-depth explanation on this. But this can extend to things beyond just like, a list of restaurants like Yelp, for example. It could be a fact-checking resource where you have a decentralized community that actually, tries to say like, hey, this is what's true and this is what's not true. Here's a list of true things. Because that's ultimately what TCR is. It's basically just community saying whether information is valid or not. Now, of course, this opens up a brand new set of problems potentially where, you could have basically people that have extreme bias that exists inside the community. Maybe it's an echo chamber. I mean, it's kind of already happening online anyways. People just kind of tend to organize in their own camps. It gets tribal. Crypto's even this way. But there's still a benefit of being able to see, if you're discerning, like which group has these tribal characteristics and what are they saying is true versus this. You still have this added benefit of transparency, which you don't really get in the Web 2.0 world. All right, so the last thing I want to say is really just a catch-all, okay? And that's really just Web 3.0 in general. Okay, there's lots of people talking about Web 3.0, but anything that's Web 2.0 now has a potential to move over to blockchain. And there's lots of stuff people aren't talking about yet. We're seeing some attention around social media, but anything you think about in Web 2.0 is probably going to be attempted for Web 3.0, to where we change the mechanics of how it works and changes the incentives to benefit the users and not just the people who created the thing itself, to be more community oriented. Okay. There's a ton of capital in the crypto space that's trying to be multiplied. Okay. Lots of smart minds in crypto who want to try new things, and the incentives are there. If you can crack the code on this and actually create it, there's a ton of upside profit potential. And we're seeing a ton of trends for regulators to potentially favor projects that have utility tokens rather than like security tokens or stable coin or something like that, where things that have really ecosystem utility are probably on the lower end of the list for regulators to, put them in their crosshairs and pose cumbersome regulations upon them. And so I think anything that's in Web 2.0 that could be on Web 3.0 is probably going to get tried at some point. And not everything's going to stick. I don't think we're just going to see everything in Web 2.0 now just migrate to Web 3.0. I think the more accurate verb is expansion, or accurate term is expansion rather than migration. And some things are going to work in this new world and some things just aren't. But keep your eyes open, because we're just going to see this new stuff, in my opinion, take off like fireworks. It just takes one person to do it successfully before, more and more people do it, and it snowballs and we have this big tipping point. So make sure you subscribe to the channel, because you'll be the first to know about these types of things as soon as they really reach product market fit and gain meaningful adoption. So that's all I got for today. As always, like I'm saying, smash that like button down below, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. That really helps these videos out, so the more people can learn about blockchain. And if you're as fast at this technology as I am, you want to get your hands dirty, I can get you started today. When you go to my YouTube homepage, you can find my free courses there. They're like Udemy courses, but they're totally free. And if you like those and you want to take the next step, or hey, maybe you want to take a master shortcut entirely, I can show you how to become a blockchain master step by step from start to finish over at dappuniversity.com/bootcamp. You don't have to be an expert to get started today. I've helped people with zero coding experience become real-world blockchain developers in a matter of months. So that's all I've got. Until next time, thanks for watching Dapp University.